to go over the same ground again, but just at the outset, you've experienced an attempt on your life through poisoned coffee. Have you had any recent threats to your life or to the life of your family and close ones, particularly since you agreed to come and appear before SCOPA?
No, fortunately, no threat has been made directly to me, so that's something to be grateful for. Thank you.
Indeed it is. Thank you very much. During your time as CEO or group CEO, you made the point that that Eskom would revert to using OEMs for maintenance in order to get the maintenance done efficiently and correctly. Was that implemented?
Honourable Lees, yes, Eskom did receive approval from Treasury finally. I think that took place in April 2022 to buy directly from the original equipment manufacturers. And that did enable Eskom to perform maintenance in a better way by using the original equipment manufacturers' spares and also their expertise. What did take place, however, was that in some instances, this was being undermined by various individuals at power stations where, and I think I allude to this in my submission, where in spite of the fact that a contract had been put in place, that inquiries would still go out to middlemen in an attempt to continue with the extraction of funds. And that was, at the time that I left, an ongoing effort to try and ensure that this abuse did not take place. But it was, this is an example of the type of resistance to ensuring that proper maintenance is performed.
Thank you. In your TV interview, you made various allegations regarding the Hitachi tenders for the boilers and the design faults. Minister Ruyter has disputed your claims that there was any corruption involved in the awarding of the tender to the consortium of Chancellor House Hitachi for the boilers. In what way were the designs manipulated? Were they manipulated to ensure that the designs could only be met by Hitachi? And did this mean that essentially Hitachi could name their price?
Honourable Lees, the sequence of events relating to the award of the boiler contract is, I think, fairly well ventilated in a sworn affidavit that I deposed, incidentally, on my final day as Chief Executive, in response to a court case brought by the United Democratic Movement and others to end load shedding. In brief, what I said in that statement was that a letter of award had been issued to another company, Alstom. That letter of award was rescinded. There is a trail of evidence that suggests that it was rescinded due to influence that was exerted by the board and people close to the board. Chancellor House, which is an investment arm of a political party, bought 25% of the shares in the local Hitachi subsidiary, if memory serves, for an amount of 1.2 million rand. This was subsequently sold for an amount of 98 million rand. The design of the boiler specification for Alstom was adjusted to reflect that the boiler height was inappropriately low. A similar design modification was not made, to my knowledge, to the Hitachi boiler design. And therefore, when the tender that was awarded to Alstom was rescinded and subsequently awarded to the Hitachi Chancellor House joint venture, that then did not take into account these modifications. And it is my view that a significant amount of design defects arose during the design and adjudication of the design submitted by Hitachi at that time. With regard to the whether or not the transaction was corrupt, I think it is, I can only refer to a settlement that was paid by Hitachi in the United States to the Securities and Exchange Commission. They paid a fine of $19 million, which is about 400 million rand at today's exchange rate. And in its submission to the SEC, the Department of Justice at the time said that Hitachi knew that their partner was an entity with political influence. So I think one can draw one's own conclusions from the language of that statement and from the fact that such a fine was paid. Unfortunately, this matter was never fully investigated in South Africa, so that remains one of those question marks that will probably remain over Eskom for time to come.
Thank you. You referred there to the board. Let's just talk about the board a little bit. The current board chair, early in March, indicated and stated that Eskom is rooting out fraud and corruption within its ranks and supply chain through proactively implementing recommendations, and here's the key, made by the Zondo Commission and beyond. So the actual performance in implementing Zondo Commission recommendations, I think, is fairly well known to be very limited, particularly in this parliamentary sphere, but I think also in the Eskom sphere. The previous board, bar for one board member, was post-haste replaced by Minister Gordhan with a new board after the confrontation between Busi Mavusa and in a SCOPA meeting. Ms. Mavusa, correctly in the eyes of many South Africans, put the blame of the Eskom woes squarely on the ANC. What was your relationship like with the Makaba board, and did that board provide you with support for the action needed to root out fraud and corruption at Eskom?
Honourable Lees, I enjoyed a positive relationship with the board chaired by the interim chair, Professor Makgoba. I was of the view that they held management, the executive, including myself, to account in a critically constructive way. It was certainly not plain sailing. I think their activities and their work were limited by a lack of capacity. As you know, there were a number of vacancies on the board that were not filled for a number of years, and that gave rise to key committees being severely depleted of board members to participate in deliberations and make decisions. Quora were typically difficult to establish for that reason. But all in all, I think that the Makgoba board understood the principles of corporate governance and understood the role of a non-executive board of providing oversight and acted accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. When the new board was established and you worked with them for a few months, was the relationship similarly positive between you and the new board? And did they provide support, or is the opposite true?
I think that support was provided. You may be aware of the fact that Eskom has a structured process in place to ensure that the recommendations of the Zondo committee are identified and followed. This was put in place prior to the accession of the new board, and that process continued, and I assume that it still continues to this day, in order to ensure that those who have been identified in the Zondo report can be held accountable to the extent that that is legally possible. The new board, I think, has adopted a markedly different approach. It has become a self-styled engaged board or activist board, and has immersed itself in operational detail, which some would characterize as overreach for a non-executive board. But I am happy to leave that to my successor to manage, in order to ensure that there is adequate separation between non-executive board members and the executive and management, so that the lines are drawn in terms of good corporate governance.
So that overreach by the board, did that play a role in your decision to leave Eskom?
Yes, it did. It certainly made my life quite challenging. Meetings were held with subordinates of mine without my knowledge, and instructions were given, and this did make my life difficult, and I experienced that as disempowering. I know certain of my colleagues on the executive committee had similar experiences. I would direct you to also engage with them to the extent that this is something that you wish to investigate further. But I think that the executive are the people who should run the company, and they should be held to account by the oversight of the board. And this is certainly the advice that we have received also from the top corporate governance experts in South Africa. So yes, the engaged board did play a role in my finding my position to be no longer tenable.
Just to build on that, so we have a board of Eskom which exercises what you would term overreach. In your TV interview, you mentioned that the Department of Public Enterprises played a very interventionist role in Eskom, micromanaging Eskom. So would it be true to say that the department, you're referring to Minister Gordhan then?
Honourable Lees, yes, I think Minister Gordhan is known for a style that can be characterized as being extremely involved in operational detail, down to individual power station units, down to speaking to middle-ranking officials in the organization, bypassing myself, my chief operating officer, the head of generation, and so forth. So yes, there were examples of intervention in the day-to-day operations, whether that was to gain information or to verify information. I don't know, but it made life as the responsible accounting officer quite difficult. Many different cooks in the kitchen does not always result in a good meal.
Thank you. So let's just stick with Minister Gordhan for a minute. You, during the course of this morning, have repeatedly referred to reports to the shareholder representative, Mr. Gordhan. And so it has become patently evident to me, certainly, that the minister who made the comment about letting other cadres or certain people feed was indeed Minister Gordhan. Now the question is the identity of this this senior political figure. I forget the exact words that you used in the interview. That person obviously is known to you, otherwise you wouldn't make such a statement. And in due course, that name will come out. But obviously, Minister Gordhan knows that name as well, I would suggest. Is that true?
Honourable Lees, that's a question best directed at Minister Gordhan. I'm not sure if he has that knowledge, but I would suggest that you direct that at him.
Just 1 second.
Thank you.
No, Mr. Ruyter, I think whilst there is, the issues you've raised, some of these questions are pretty straightforward. Because if you knew the person and you reported the person, all Honourable Lees is asking is, did you disclose that to the minister, and therefore is that Minister Gordhan in a position to know who it is? Yeah, so it's a very simple, I think, let's just answer the questions. Some of them are really yes or no responses. And I think Honourable Lees's question again is very fair and direct. He's not asking you to disclose. He's not asking you to disclose because you made it patently clear that you won't. But his question remains fundamentally fair.
Right. Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you, Honourable Minister, Honourable Lees. I think that
perhaps after 2024.
All right, I shall refrain from saying anything in that regard. Yes, I think that is a question that will be able to be answered by Minister Gordhan. He should be able to answer that question. To my recollection, I did mention it to him, and he would be best placed to respond to that.
Okay, Mr. Ruyter, the whole question of cartels, I'm sorry, I've just missed my point to the top guy in the cartels. What's his name? I can't remember the name, but nevertheless, you make reference to a scheme of arrangement for very expensive motor cars. And earlier you mentioned posts on Facebook and so on. So, and you mentioned dealerships that house cars ostensibly owned by the dealer, but actually already paid cash for by the criminals, cartel members. Which motor dealership is involved in this? I asked you at the beginning whether you'd experienced any further threats in your life, and I would think that this might be a source of a threat if there was one. But do you know, if you're able to say that there was such a scheme and dealership involved, who was that dealer, or those dealers? Is there more than one?
Honourable Lees, let me first say that this is a very good example of how lifestyle audits can be circumvented. If transactions are done in cash and assets are acquired but not registered to your name, or assets such as cattle, for example, are delivered to farms in lieu of payment, then the typical lifestyle audit will not pick it up. So the individuals concerned have become very skilled at circumventing the rigor of lifestyle audits that typically focus on bank accounts, cars registered in your name, properties that you own, and so forth. And this is one of the reasons why lifestyle audits have limited efficiency in picking up some of these issues that we are having to guard against. On legal advice, Honourable Lees, I'm advised that I should not disclose the identity of this motor dealer for A, reasons of ongoing investigation, B, civil as well as criminal issues that may arise from it, and therefore I can merely confirm that I was made aware of the existence and the operation of such a dealer, and that this is taking place in Mpumalanga. And unfortunately, that's the extent to which I am able to go based on my legal advice.
All right, Mr. Ruyter, I assume that those names will come out in due course. What we have done is we've picked up one video which we believe is part of that cartel, and we have indeed done a search of the background and identified a motor dealership. But in due course, I suppose this will come out. But it makes it very difficult for us to make progress. But let me move on to our newly appointed Minister of Electricity and ask your opinion of a statement that he has made. While addressing media at Kusile, so I assume he was referring to Kusile and not to Eskom as a whole, but it came across as if it was Eskom as a whole. He stated that, and I quote, "The challenges that we've had here, these are technical problems. They have nothing to do with so-called corruption." And then again, at Butuka, the source of the problem is at the mine. I assume that's coal mine. It has nothing to do with someone diverting coal and then mixing with rocks. Is the Minister Ramakgopa misrepresenting the facts, or in plain language, is he simply lying?
Honourable Lees, I don't want to characterize the Minister as lying. I think that I can make a number of remarks to present a different perspective, and then I will leave it to the committee to arrive at its own conclusions. I find myself in the rather unusual position of fully concurring with the National Union of Mine Workers, who said that as the Highveld region, we are categorically and emphatically disagreeing with the Minister's version that corruption in Eskom does not play any role toward persistent load shedding. And I think that that is quite clear, and NUM have gone on record with us. I think Solidarity have also made statements to that effect. if you look at the situation pertaining at Kusile, first of all, if the boilers had been appropriately designed, then the issue of a higher exhaust gas velocity, which caused the carryover of ash and gypsum into the duct that eventually collapsed, leading to the outage of 3 units, would not have taken place. And I earlier expressed, or I gave some background to the committee on the supplier of those boilers and how that particular design came about. In my mind, it's also quite clear that if one buys coal with a higher ash content, specifically if that ash content exceeds the capacity of the fabric air filters to trap any particulate matter, then there will be carryover into the duct. I think this committee is very well aware of the fact that for a number of reasons, the construction of the new Largo mine has been delayed. We can maybe speculate on the reasons why that has happened, and that there has been significant issues with coal quality at Kusile. And that coal quality has been a significant contributing factor to the ash carryover, which eventually resulted in the collapse of the duct. So I think there's at least that would suggest that corruption does have an impact on load shedding, and that particularly corruption in the coal supply chain played a contributing role to the collapse of the duct at Kusile and the loss of the 2,000 odd megawatts as a result of those 3 units being rendered inoperable.
Can I just build a little bit on the point you made about New Largo? The delays in opening up that mine to supply Kusile, I would understand from your presentation that that could well be a result of the criminal cartels wishing to keep the road transport activities going, and with road transport, of course, the supply of subgrade coal and rock. Would you agree with that view?
Honourable Lisa, I think with any question of this nature, the departing principle should be to ask who benefits. And clearly the people who benefited from a delay in the opening up of New Largo, and just to refresh the committee's memory, Kusile was built where it is because of its proximity to New Largo, where there are significant coal reserves of a quality that is suitable for combustion at the Kusile power station. So the delay in commissioning New Largo, I think, can in all probability be attributed to the fact that there were beneficiaries of coal being transported by road, and that the quality of coal, I think there's ample evidence that the quality of coal that was delivered to Kusile was below standard, and that Kusile was significantly exposed to the consequences of poor quality coal being delivered in terms of the reliability of its mills, its air emission compliance, the ash content of the coal, steel, rocks, water, and so forth being added to the coal. And at the time that I left, there was a significant effort on the go initiated by myself to improve the functioning of the coal stockyard at Kusile in order to ensure that we could exercise better control over coal arriving there. And hopefully that will go some way towards addressing the problem.
That being the case then, the development of the New Largo coal mine, a major investment, not controlled by officials within a particular power station would seem to indicate that if the cartels were successful in delaying the development, it would need more than just Eskom officials within their reach to cooperate and take the necessary action for the delays, which are now 10 odd years. It's mass delays, it's not months, to have taken place. Would you agree?
Or at least it certainly seems that way, that there was some degree of collusion or complicity in taking those decisions to delay the construction and development of New Lager Colliery with a view to continuing to benefit contractors who deliver coal by road, thereby possibly incidentally, but possibly also intentionally, contributing to the delivery of poor quality coal to that power station, and as I've just mentioned, the attendant failures that occurred.
Thank you. So what this is leading me to conclude is your comment during the interview about this very senior politician, presumably resident in Mpumalanga, who's involved in the cartels. And we know that the name that's been thrown out there by various people as a possibility of being this person is the previous deputy president. And so one would then have someone who has a lot of influence about able possibly to delay even the development of a coal mine. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time. I'll cede until my next turn, even though I'm deputy chair.
This thing of deputy chair, I'm not this palace coup you want. All right, Babu Sonia, let's get right to you, because I'm mindful of time. It's over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Chair, honorable members, and the former CEO of Eskom, Mr. Ruyter. Thanks very much, as you have indicated, Chair, for your availability here today. Mr. Ruyter, as the CEO of Eskom, have you ever ventured into the appointment of a private intelligence operation for investigative exercise within Eskom?
The appointment of a private intelligence organization was not done by Eskom. It was not done by using Eskom funds. So no public funds were expended, and Eskom was not the client or the beneficiary of such an appointment, and I was not aware of any contract or the terms of those contracts. I was aware of a contract, but not the terms of the contract that had been concluded.
Mr. Ruyter, have you been party into the appointment of private investigation, which you have referred to in terms of your report?
Because of the significant risk posed to Eskom as a result of criminal activity, it became clear that Eskom required some form of intelligence gathering capability. And this, I think, can be attributed to the fact that as the owner of a number of national key points, we were charged with the obligation to protect those national key points and to ensure that we took all steps necessary to secure the safety of those national key points. We therefore approached funders with a view to seeing if assistance could be obtained, again, not using any Eskom money, not going through Eskom as a contracting party. And in this particular instance, again, this was encouraged by the political principles involved, with a view to ensuring that we could secure our assets from criminals targeting those operations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruyter. Now I understand that indeed you are aware of that investigation. The outcome of that investigation, as you have indicated, was shared with a number of state-related criminal investigation authorities at about mid of the year 2022. Substantively, what are the key areas which are identified through that report?
The report was shared with law enforcement, and they undertook a number of steps. I think, again, as a result of intelligence, again, I can quote what President Cyril Ramaphosa said in his SONA brief at the beginning of the year, in February 23, where he said that an intelligence-led operation had led to 43 arrests at Eskom installations. It also led to the deployment of soldiers at 4 Eskom power stations on the 16th of December of last year. It led to 4 black sites being raided by the Hawks. I understand a further 30 of these sites are still under investigation. Understanding the special investigative team has been established by the South African Police Services, and that a number of changes have been made to police management in Mpumalanga, and that more resources have been deployed as a consequence of the intelligence that was shared with law enforcement that flowed from this particular investigation.
Who funded this investigation?
This investigation was funded privately by private donors, and they were also the contracting party. So again, Eskom was not a party to the contract involved.
As part of your good intention, you had to approach some of those individual bodies for funding after you have identified those areas which you have indicated earlier on, that there is a huge risk which needs some form of certainty so that it should be followed appropriately. And therefore you saw it fit that you would approach people who have got interest or institutions who have interest in terms of funding that initiative. So who ultimately made funds available for that investigation?
The funds were made available, as I said, by private donors. As Eskom was not a party to any of the agreements, as no public funds were involved, I would suggest that the identity of those donors should remain within their purview. Again, I would not wish to interfere in any ongoing criminal or legal investigation, nor would I wish to expose anyone who attempted to support the combating of crime in a good faith manner to the sort of risk that I myself and other members of my executive have faced in order to protect their identity. I think it's up to those individuals to decide whether or not they wish to disclose. Again, since no public funds were involved in this, respectfully, I suggest that this is outside of the scope of purview.
The interesting part to it, Mr. Director, the findings of the report fall in line with our visit as SCOPA to your offices sometime at the same time with the release of this kind of a report, when a member of your board became erratic in a way, which seemingly would you confirm that there was a board member who assisted you to get funds for that private investigation?
Again, Honourable Member, with bearing in mind that we are dealing with the potential organized crime and the fact that people's lives are at risk, with respect, I would rather not confirm or deny that there was a board member who was involved in enabling the funding of such an investigation to take place.
Is it Mr. Director, in the same vein, on the strength of the report, there's a categorization of what is termed cartels, which you have referred to in your report. That strength of the outcome of the investigations that you are aware of, that you have been primarily involved for them to have been undertaken, then the outcome would have been a note which recognizes the existence of these cartels.
Again, if I understand your question correctly, Honourable Member, we ensured that this information would be conveyed to the South African Police Services. I've mentioned some of the examples of successes that, in my opinion, can be directly attributed to this intelligence gathering exercise, and I therefore think that the information that was provided to the South African Police Services was in fact acted on and led to a number of successes that would otherwise, in all probability, not have been achieved if that information had not been obtained and shared with law enforcement.
Well, the same report which you have told us about, it's the same report which gives you some information in relation to who is allegedly participating in these kinds of cartels, wherein you have strength to make those allegations publicly on the interviews. Is that the case?
Honourable Member, yes, I think that certainly there were investigations that were done that brought about allegations that we have the potential that, or the alleged involvement of senior officials in crime in Mpumalanga. I think that much is now quite clear, and we have to now let the law enforcement investigations take their course. I think it's important that we are able to give the police the freedom to conduct their investigation without having to combat the public availability of information which could compromise those investigations and potentially defeat the purpose of the outcome. Honourable Chair, while I've got the microphone, I unfortunately have a commitment that I cannot get out of. As per the agreement reached with SCOPA prior to this meeting, I have given the 3 hours that had been agreed on. I understand that the members would probably wish to continue with the session, but unfortunately, as I communicated prior to accepting this appointment, I am regrettably unable to continue. So if with your permission and with due respect, I would like to excuse myself at this stage.
Yeah, Mr. Ruyter, I was going to say that let's allow Honourable Somyo to conclude. He's concluding now. And that 10-minute break makes a huge difference. So Honourable Somyo will conclude.
Okay.
He's concluding, he indicates he's concluding, so he's wrapping up.
No, if you allow, Chair, I have a list of questions which I think are critical, but I want to, then taking from what Honourable List has referred to, and in terms of the response provided by Mr. De Ruyter, that he was somewhat rocked in terms of a relationship with a new board, and there was a causal factor which has somewhat driven him out of Eskom. Can one conclude that at the same time, it did arise that Mr. De Ruyter has not effectively been vetted as a senior and accounting officer of Eskom? That might be as well a contributing factor when that fact was exposed, that he has been acting on a huge responsibility which exposed Eskom's finances and decisions, and all the time the operator is not necessarily vetted as required in terms of his own responsibility and matters of property. And that fact would have as well be a crucial moment for him to want to leave Eskom, because that exposure was a big exposure for an individual like himself not to have effected a vetting exercise. Thank you, Chair.
Let's get the response to it. I'll just want to make one comment and we'll release Mr. De Ruyter. If you'd like to respond to that, Mr. De Ruyter.
Honourable Chair, I think the matter of my vetting was extensively ventilated during the last SCOPA meeting that I attended. The request for vetting was only made by SSA to me in October of 2022, and of course with my decision to resign, which I made known to the board on the 12th of December, that vetting process then became moot. So that was not pursued. And I think, as I've indicated, having served 3 years, more than 3 years at Eskom, this is something of a record in terms of lasting at the helm of Eskom. So I do think that resigning when I did, particularly having regard to the circumstances prevailing at the time, I had adequate reason to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I think what we'll do is, how do we put it this way? Mr. Ruyter, thank you very much for appearing. It is certainly not the last time we will be engaging. I think we will meet again because some of the issues have not been adequately ventilated. And you have given, in part, certain pointers. In part, there are answers which are still inconclusive moving forward. And so those need to be dealt with. So I think, colleagues, for this part, we can leave it at that and say we will meet again in due course. I do believe that what you have given us today is what you gave in the interview. And so we, for all intents and purposes, 99.9% literally at square one. And so we'll have to probe these issues further. But thank you very much for appearing this morning. And as I've said, we will meet again. So thank you very much, Mr. Ruyter. Colleagues, we will break and return at 1 so that we can then make a determination in terms of what it is that is the next action step for us. And then you can take some time to bring it all together, and then we will reconvene at 1, and I'm sure we'll be done by 2 o'clock to map up a way forward, because there was a proposal before we arrived at this meeting on the key question of a committee inquiry into Eskom. And we had said we'd want to hear what Mr. Ruyter has to say insofar as the issues around the interview are concerned. And so now we need to take a decision in terms of how we proceed with this. Obviously, there are officials and persons whom have been named, whom must provide responses to some of the key critical areas to it, including the board, because I'm still not clarified in terms of the reporting to the SAPS and the due processes that followed after that. In terms of cases, the SIU has reported on some of these issues, but not to the extent to which they seemingly were reported. And there's political accountability that has to take place. So we, as I'm saying, the answers remain largely unanswered, and they have to be answered. So as I'm saying, we will meet. But once again, Mr. Ruyter, if you're still online, thank you very much. Colleagues, we will reconvene at 1300 hours, and we will take our break at the Marks Restaurant building as per usual. 1 o'clock.